This conference will now be recorded.
Hello. Hi, Raj. Thank you for joining the
Yeah,
session.
I can hear you. I can
Yeah,
hear you.
okay, great. So I hope, all right, great. So we've earlier gone through the introduction session, so I'm not gonna
So
repeat things. Yeah,
can I ask you something? Can you bring up the course contents and see what we are going to cover today? Do you have that?
sure. Yeah, we can do that. All right, can you see this?
One sec. Yes, I can see.
Yeah. So this is the overall course content. We'll be covering a couple of topics today, and yeah, we'll follow up. Today we'll discuss the introduction part, deployment models, architecture,
Okay.
licensing models. So
Okay.
we have discussed files. We will just I mean, we'll discuss that again. What app? So we'll discuss the first two parts.
Okay.
Basis for how we close this. I mean, how much detail we discuss. We'll see if we can start probably the second part tomorrow. Yeah, the third part, Qliksense Hub and app. Right. The first two parts are the main key parts for you. Yeah.
Right. I want to have that fundamental understanding first, right?
Yeah. Right. Then yeah. Then we have around development part of it, editor scripting. See, these are the things that once you finish, then we can discuss also certain case studies. And when I'm discussing these use cases, I'll also explain to you. Uh, Generally, that's part of my training also, that I will explain to you how these capabilities were used in certain projects, right? So that is
Oh,
where the whole value add is.
that's the whole. That's one of the main
Yeah.
reasons I want to take up this. And I was glad, you are working, so you have the knowledge of real-time scenarios there, right?
Right.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So mm, and let's get back to what we had discussed earlier.
I know it's early in the morning for you. Are you okay?
Yeah, no, I'm okay. I'm just trying to pull up one of the slides so that I can help you
Again, if it is
understand.
too early, like,
Yeah.
we can always do half an hour late, right? If it is
No, no,
too,
I'm good. No, no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm just trying to structure these thoughts. Yeah.
okay, right.
Okay. We
Take
are
your time.
good.
Take it.
Right. Okay. So I was just also trying to rerun what we covered last time. So you understand the last session, right? What we discussed, or
Yes, I do. Yeah,
oh, so I'll come back on this part of this. So it's just not data that is enough. So there's data, analytics, and insights. So that is the overall platform of Qlik, right?
right.
Now, how does Qlik work? In a basic scenario, last time I discussed this, you
So,
have Qliksense.
do you mind if I ask a question there? Like, can we do a little bit of basic on, for example, like, the the evolution of, like, big data, right? So previously it used to be just reports, then became like, data warehouse, data analytics, right? Then
Mhm.
came kind of like, big data. Then from big data now, like, we are, yeah, I think like this is okay. Yeah, can you please touch upon this? Then we'll just briefly. I know, like, you went through, but just briefly to refresh my memory. Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, the first generation of, yeah, like you rightly said, analytics has gone through evolution of change. So there have been
Right,
three generations of analytics, right? The first
right,
generation was only report generation, where the IT team used to generate reports for you. You used to get the reports and publish and work and send it to anyone, right? So the IT team, if you wanted a sales report, IT team would generate a sales report for you and send it to you. Now, what you get is only a plain uh, Excel format report or a PDF report in which
right,
they used to mention certain values and sales. Now, these are all static in nature. When I say static, you could do nothing. So if they say that, okay, New York has X amount of sales, you knew that New York has X amount of sales. Now, if somebody asks you what products, what customers, what places, what stores, then again you had to fall back on IT, and IT had to would generate whatever question you ask, that report they would generate and give it to you. That was the centralized version where IT was in complete control of what reports are being generated. And as the name says, it was purely reporting. It was not analysis. Though we call it as first generation of analytics, it was purely reporting. The second generation came in where users were able to question, or IT would develop something, give users access to that. Users were able to filter values, so they could select a value. Suppose, like I gave the example, if New York had 1 million sales, they could look within New York which were the stores that did that sale, which are the products that did the sale, and which are the customers. Now, what happened? They had a capability to filter it, and that is where it has been going on. So that is where during this second generation is, like you rightly said, where the data warehousing concept came in, where people used to IT used to manage it, create those data warehouses, and enable modern day technologies. So just to give you a heads up, Qlik View was one of the products that was in the second generation, which made it decentralized IT. Right? It became a very big hit back then because the first generation was a pain for business users. They couldn't do any decision making, and they had always been dependent on IT team, which in itself was a bottleneck. The second generation allowed users to question data, find answers by themselves, not depending on IT. But still,
So,
it restricted for
can I say Informatica would be an example of that? Informatica. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
no, no. Informatica is a ETL solution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, in one
So
of my
Informatica.
previous clients, they were using Informatica for users were able to query the data and, generate not reports, but at least the format they need, right? So the data was out there as a data warehouse in Informatica. I mean, you're right. Informatica was also an ETL tool, but
Mhm.
Informatica also had a user interface for like the end users or business users where they can query
Hmm.
the data in any way they need. It's more of a drag and drop or like whatever they
Right. It was
just understand. Yeah.
not really. So whatever drag and drop that you're referring to was again part of the first generation. So the first generation itself had a couple of ETL solutions where the centralized ID team had the requirement, right? Suppose if a user asked to report, so where how did the centralized IT team generate? That was one of the Informatica versions.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So
they had
still
Informatica.
IT needs to generate those reports and publish it to the users, right? Okay.
Correct, correct, correct. So what ID, so okay, even in first generation, at the data side, there were a lot of changes that have come in. For example, let's assume a organization back then also there were a lot of other requirement, other capabilities, right? For example, I had ERP.
Right.
Then organizations you used to have a lot of databases. They used to have ERP. They used to have CRM.
Right.
So what are the ERPs? Oracle back then, right? SAP,
Right.
then DB2 mainframes, then
Okay.
AS400,
Okay.
other databases. CRM was Dynamics, NetSuite, right? Then if you ask, so these were olden, the first generation guys. Now, how
Right.
did IT team generate reports? They couldn't directly query this. So first they used to query these. So what are the first generation solutions? These were mainly around Crystal Report,
Yep. That's good. Okay. Our SQL Server reporting
Crystal
stuff.
Report, right? Right. Now, while they did this with Crystal Report, which could do this, but connect to ERPs and various other direct databases, they were having challenges doing this. That is where they came up with the entire DW thought process, right? So if you ask me, this is
Sure.
where the entire DW thought process came in. Data warehouse, the big terminology came in. What they did was for here, so this is where the SQL DW, or you can say Oracle DW.
Okay.
Then back then we had, I think, Teradata. They were modern. See, every aspect of data has grown. So the
Right.
ERPs have changed. Earlier
Right.
ERPs were Oracle, SAP, DB2, S400, Dynamics, NetSuite, and
Okay.
databases were limited. Again, SQL, Oracle were the ones that I can maximum recall. So to
Correct.
get data into these, they used to have Teradata. So that is where Teradata used to come in.
What is Teradata?
This, sorry, not Teradata, Informatica.
Okay.
Informatica used to come in. So now what Informatica did? Informatica pulled data from these ERPs and all the CRM and bring it into a data warehouse. So the user interface is not really a user interface. It is just stopgap approach. So the interface is for an end user to pull in data from these solutions and
Okay.
publish it to DB. While Informatica is huge, see Informatica, when you bought Informatica, it also had a front end part which could do some reports,
Okay.
report generation. So
Right.
it was not a solution meant for it, but people used to
Okay. Understood.
use it for that, right? So this was where the first generation was, where it ended over here, and the users got
So even
just
from
got
the
the report.
data warehouse you're talking about, you can develop reports. Again, it's IT dependent, right? You can develop reports using,
Yes,
for example, the SAP business objects or crystal reports or whatever that is,
correct.
right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So SAP business objects and all sit over here. So even business objects is a second generation solution. So this is purely first generation.
I
First
understand.
generation had limited capabilities, IT. So this whole thing was IT.
Okay.
And this whole thing was IT, and only the users get a static report. So that
Okay.
is where the whole ball game changed when the second generation solutions came in. So second generation solutions basically demanded, or
Okay.
the evolution of analytics, people started demanding real-time data. So that is where, okay, we'll just say no fill. So people started asking, that is where a layer of modern, back then these were modern day technologies. So you an idea. So these were Qlik view, you can say SAP business objects or SAP BW, then Tableau to a certain extent, Power BI just came, right? MicroStrategy.
Okay. So SAP Business Objects is equivalent to ClickView?
Yeah, it is similar to
Oh,
Qlik. So
it was more
basically,
like a crystal reports thing. Okay.
yeah, Crystal reports also.
Okay.
But Crystal reports was never a end user reporting. It was always a backend IT
Correct,
first generation solution.
correct. You're right.
No users could use Crystal reports. It was IT team who could generate it. They used to have see when I say users, right? IT team used to have specific developers for Crystal report,
Right.
right? And these were hosted, these were developed and managed by IT team, but users could use them directly, query them directly, work with data directly,
Okay.
right? And in the second generation, things evolved also, right? So it was not only Informatica, there was Talent. There's a Talent, so ETL solutions I'm talking about.
Got it.
Then there was Talent. Then things changed. I think data warehousing also changed. It was earlier only SQL. Now there is Teradata.
Okay.
Teradata is one of the data warehouses. It was promoted in the second generation.
So
Teradata
what's
was
the
promoted
difference
heavily.
between a SQL Server or an Oracle database versus a Teradata? What? It's a database, right?
It is. So
It is. Why do
it
you
is
call
always
it?
about hmm,
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
how do. So it is a similar difference between, imagine your 24 7-Eleven stores versus a Walmart.
Okay.
When you
So
visit Walmart, it is fast, it is structured, it is everything, right?
okay.
There's capability to scale. Now, 7-Eleven is still structured,
Right.
still you find things, right? But what happens? It is smaller in scale. So
Got it.
SQL and Oracle back then. So, but if you ask me before Walmart, 7-Eleven was very big, right? So you'd say, okay, 7-Eleven supermarket is really big. I can
Okay.
find everything. That was only a wow. When
Okay.
things changed, so things grew. So that's how it is.
Got it. Okay.
And the reason I brought this was, imagine how you find things, right? In
Right.
a 7-Eleven supermarket, regular supermarket versus a Walmart supermarket, how
Right.
the billing works. In a regular supermarket, you go, you shop. To get out, you might take a long time because it's a small number of counters for billing. It is not very well structured. It is dependent on few people. But a Walmart is very big, structured with a lot of, I mean, more than, yeah, it is a lot of counters for you to exit fast. So it is
Okay.
not only input, it is also the output of the database that matters, right? When you set up a data warehouse, the output matters a lot because people have to query the data and work with it, right? That is why.
Okay. So the SAP BW and SAP Business Object, you know what? Like, that's not relevant. Let's move on with that thing, right? I was wondering, like, what is the difference there? Business warehouse versus business objects. But if it's not too relevant, then that's okay. We don't need to.
No, yeah, business objects is again an analytic solution, right? So it is, so it, okay, to give you an heads up, business objects was never SAP. So business objects was an independent product like Crystal Reporting.
I got it. Okay.
Even Crystal Reporting was an independent company and product. So
Right.
they all started to solve the first generation challenges.
Okay.
What was
Okay.
the first generation challenge? Users never got this. So the
Got it.
BW, of course, SAP BW was always SAP. It is called as Business Warehouse.
Got
That
it.
was part of the product. So what happened was, if you had SAP, you could use BW.
Okay.
SAP BW didn't need a data warehouse. Okay, I'll remove this from here. SAP
Oh,
BW was a direct work with SAP. So
oh, okay. I understand.
it directly works only with SAP. It does not work with any other data source,
Yeah, I understand.
right? So
I
business object was an independent product. SAP bought it and they
got.
made it as SAP business objects.
I
So
understand.
while all of these things were happening historically, if you ask me, so uh, see, there were big players, right? Oracle, SAP, DB2 was IBM,
Okay.
right? So I'm talking about DB2, IBM.
I
So the
understand.
war of concurrence, or like, uh, right, the people back then it was these three big or four big players. Microsoft also.
Mm-hmm.
Dynamics SQL Server was Microsoft, right?
I understand.
Just Microsoft. So these were the guys who wanted to capture the market, and they always used to create a stack. So what SAP used to do, if a customer bought had a ERP SAP, they used to force them to have SAP BW,
Mm-hmm.
and they used to restrict them to have anything outside SAP.
I understand.
Oracle did the same thing. Oracle, when if somebody had SAP Oracle as a solution as a ERP, they used to only force them to have a Oracle data warehouse. Then they had some other Oracle follow-up reporting solutions.
Okay.
Similarly with Microsoft or IBM, so they always so that is called as a stack. So stack is like you buy from one vendor everything. So that then when business object came in, it became independent. That is where SAP pounced on it and bought it so that they make that as a stack option. Then
Okay.
Qlik View, but I think by 2010, people were done with a stack. Companies wanted freedom, right? Because stack had always restricted them for a lot and demanded money, like, left, right, center. So that
Okay.
is where everybody put the foot down, telling that we need independent. And that is when ClickView came in, MicroStrategy came in, Tableau came in, and these guys did the second generation.
Okay. Okay.
Right? But second generation also saw a shift into big data. This is where the big data came in. Now, what did big data bring in? Different storage mechanisms, Hadoop, right? So Hadoop came in, and Hadoop brought in different flavors of storage. So within Hadoop,
So
see, Hadoop
storage
is a
is a problem because of they used to talk about that V's like velocity, volume. That's what is trying to
correct, correct,
right.
right. So imagine, so just analogy of the store, one Walmart versus multiple Walmarts with their distribution centers, with their supporting centers, right? So they will have warehouses, multiple warehouses. They'll have different stores. Then they started shipping. So, like, you just build that analogy from a regular store, like a corner store, to a 7-Eleven supermarket, to a Walmart, and Walmart's entire network. So Hadoop is like a network. So Hadoop is not like a database storage, right? You just like I gave example. So it
Okay.
has multiple storage edges. So Hadoop works as a cluster. So if you look at just focus out and look at Walmart cluster, multiple Walmart stores, multiple warehouses, and the entire distribution chain. So that is what Hadoop is powerful of. That is where it came in, kicked in as Hadoop. So earlier it was data warehouse. So Hadoop became the data lake champion. So
So data lake champion.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
So
what
now you're
right? So,
introducing a term called data lake, right? What
correct.
is that data lake meaning? What does that have to do with big data, right?
Right. So for example, Walmart,
Okay.
right? In Walmart, what happens? Walmart goes to all brands, tells them, okay, I have a single store, bring it everything. So that's the data warehouse.
Okay.
That's the data warehouse. Now I told, okay, Hadoop is the Walmart cluster. Even better analogy is, while Walmart is the data warehouse, imagine Amazon. Amazon doesn't tell all the vendors to put their products into their warehouse, right? So what Amazon does, Amazon created a shopping cart. It enabled the vendors to ship, and it enabled the users to buy. So that is
Mhm.
Hadoop. So what Hadoop does is, it does not put everything centrally. it connects to different databases. So data lake is that concept. It's an Amazon kind of a concept. Related, it is an analogy to Amazon.com. You can have products anywhere. You can have stores anywhere. You can have warehouses anywhere. You can be any brand. So it puts together everything and makes it a data lake
So
for a
there are,
user.
in a textbook, like, definition, right? Because I too work in an IT in a different level, right? Not too
Correct.
much technical, but what I have in a textbook way, like, what I have seen this one as data lake is a cluster of databases, right? Is that correct?
Correct.
Is it a cluster of
Yeah, that's
data?
what I'm trying. Yeah.
Okay,
See, it is not cluster of databases. So the way it works is, it is your requirement. See, few people, okay, if you go with books and you go with online, few people call Hadoop as data lake, and they consider only Hadoop as data lake, okay, which is
okay,
not the scenario. Hadoop is also a storage mechanism. So it is just a single storage mechanism. So a
okay,
data lake in general is, you're right. It's a definition is cluster of databases. Now, how do the cluster of databases work? For
okay,
example, you have ERP, you have Oracle, you have Microsoft, you have CRM, right? So the earlier concept was bring all of these things into a single database, whichever we plan, data warehouse. So in the data warehouse, we could choose SQL, Oracle, or Teradata. Now,
okay.
what data lake concept was, okay, you leave the data where it is, structure it in the place, but make sure you have an engine which could process. So Hadoop also has an engine which can connect to these ERP solutions, CRMs, and pick up the data and give it to the user.
So
That is
what's
why I said,
between that and the data warehousing techniques with ETL solution? What is the difference
correct.
there?
Okay. So ETL still exists. Even if you use data lake, ETL will still exist because ETL is the solution that will bring data from all of these things and give it to Hadoop.
Okay,
Data lake is not a solution, it's a concept.
okay,
You can't go buy data lake off the shelf.
okay.
Data lake is purely a conceptual thought process on how you enable all of these ERPs and CRMs, building solutions and delivering that end user experience to find the right data in your organization. So it is storage, management, and delivery of data. So that is where, if you ask me, data lakes at one point have started failing. The reason is all organizations jumped onto data lake, telling, okay, it's a new concept, every enterprise should have it. But at a certain point, they didn't realize how to use it because
So the
it
difference
was
between data warehouse and data lake is data warehouse is more like a storage mechanism, but data lake is storage as well as some kind of data delivery. Is that what I'm hearing?
no. See, technically both are same. Data
Okay,
warehouse also stores and delivers data. Data warehouse also does the same thing. It
okay,
also stores and delivers data.
okay. I'm just trying
Why
to
would
see
you
what's the
in
difference
one?
there. Why do we call
Yeah.
this?
The difference is in a data warehouse, you have a single data warehouse, single database.
Okay,
For
understood.
example, I data SQL server. So data warehouse, I have SQL server. The
Okay,
data lake is the concept of managing a network of clusters. You're not dependent on a single system or a single machine, right? In this scenario, you just won't have one SQL server. The SQL server can never be a data lake. You will have, like you said, either a cluster of servers, or Hadoop is always called as a data lake because Hadoop works on the entire concept of clusters. So if I bring in data from all my ERP into Hadoop, Hadoop pushes into multiple cluster storage. It manages processing scalability.
okay. So can I have but it has to be like one product. Probably like if I go for Oracle, it has to be all Oracle. If I choose a database, even in the data lake for a cluster, or am I confusing here? See, when you said data warehouse, right? You said like it could be SQL Server or Oracle or whatever, so something else. But when it comes to Hadoop, it's a cluster of databases. It has its own mechanism of like how it interacts and how it retrieves the data. But can it be
No,
different technologies of databases?
Yes, it is. If it is independent of Hadoop, yes. But Hadoop in itself is like one single database, you can say. Within that database, it's clusters. It manages its own cluster. So it is one product. So when you choose Hadoop as your data lake, Hadoop does everything. So it creates within itself it creates clusters of Hadoop and it does distributed processing. But if you're like an organization strategy, if you plan data lake, yes, you can have SQL, you can have Oracle, and all of these things clustered and a centralized way to deliver data.
So what database like Hadoop uses? It has its own database. Hadoop
Yeah,
has its own.
See, Hadoop is a file system database. It's a
Oh,
concept.
okay. Okay, I understand now. Okay.
It's a clustered based database.
Okay. Okay. So Hadoop itself is a
So
database.
what Hadoop itself is a database. So it's a clustered. So there are different storage mechanisms within Hadoop. There's
Oh,
Spark, there's Avro. It's a open source, right? So there are a lot of flavors to it. So it
oh,
is so it's just like Linux. If you have used Linux, right?
um,
Linux is a free OS. But if you go online for Linux, there is Ubuntu, there is CentOS, there is all of these things, right? So likewise, Hadoop is a free storage. Internally, it is a cluster based. How it works is you need to have a cluster of servers, which Hadoop manages as edges or nodes where the data is stored and processed. Now, to give you an idea, so a file is generally split into 2, 3 clusters and stored. And when you need information, it is put together by Hadoop. So that is the whole advantage of Hadoop, and it gives you the result. So at any point, you don't have to put everything into one place. So what that also means is when you want to process something, it does distributed processing on these nodes. So if there are 5 nodes of cluster for Hadoop, when you ask it to process something, it actually does smaller processes across all these 5 nodes, puts it together and gives the result to you.
so the data is fragmented here, right, in a Hadoop cluster. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So this was the second generation where users were able to slice dice. So what users were able to do back then, this was called self-service. What? Select values, slice dice data,
Okay.
analyze, right? So this was the second generation. Now, as time passed, users became smarter. So users had a clear-cut requirement. Okay. All of these things was same thing, right? So in the third generation, which we are in,
Right.
data is over here. The only changes that have have come in is data is increased, like you said, velocity is increased, variety is increased, all of these things have increased on,
So the
and
first
users
generation,
have
second
become smarter.
generation, these are industry terminologies. Are you using to categorize these? The
Okay,
first,
so
second generation
no,
and third.
it's a pretty much industry. It was started with one of these analytics company, so
Okay.
it has become a lingo in the industry. So if
Okay.
you a lot of people know about it, yes. I
Got it.
mean, most of the organizations know about it, yes.
Okay.
Okay, who started it, to be frank, it was Qlik Tableau MicroStrategy for them to differentiate themselves around where they stand, right? So how, because a lot of everybody have the same question, right? What is SAP BO? What is Qliksense? What is QlikView? What is Tableau? What is MicroStrategy?
Right.
There's a better way to categorize things. And I put this data warehousing and Teradata, all of these things into the same buckets for you to understand it better.
Oh, it's a good. Okay, it's good.
Now, the third generation was the users became smarter. How? Because people started, I mean, all organizations now started understanding the importance of data, importance of data-based decision making. So users also started learning. So if you are now the current generation of analysts or the smartest guys who want, what they know is, okay, I gave I'll fall back on the old example.
Mm-hmm.
The IT enabled them with QlikView, telling that I have given you data for New York. What is the data? It has New York, it has stores, it has product, it has customers. The user says, fine, I get all of those things. So what I can filter is I can filter for New York, filter for a store, filter for products, filter for a customer. This is the analysis that I got from the transactional data that I have. Now users will say, great, but what I also want to do with this data, with this analysis, I want to see the uh, population of New York, of each area or each pin code, understand their, I also want the data for their uh, salary structure or their spend capability, which I'm getting from elsewhere. So users will say, I have the data set, don't worry about the data set. I have that very much, I have that data set separately available. Okay. Along with this, while you're giving me the current data, what the user will also tell the IT team is, give me some data set or give me the data set for the customer for last customer selling patterns for last 10 to 15 years. Now, it would have not been built or given to the user in that current report, in the first report. So what IT will tell, okay, I can't build that report for you because it's ad hoc. I will give you the data set. So here is the data set. Do what you want to do. So this is where our third generation is, that the user is not dependent on only what IT team gives them. So the user wants to use what the IT team has given to them. Suppose if they're using Qlik, they want to add that additional data set, ad hoc data sets that they want from internal sources or external sources and use it for their analysis. Now, this is called as democratization of data. What it means is, it is up to users what data they want to use for analysis. We
So let
don't.
me ask you here a question, right? So the Informatica piece, like at least in this example, right? So that ETL, we already like bring in specific data, what is required for either click view or a static report, right? So we don't bring typically like everything in SAP, right? We don't do a data dump of everything in SAP database, right? So
Correct,
the
correct.
ETL is like devised to bring in like whatever is required, right? So now you are saying in a democratized version that you also give a data dump of whatever is in there in a for customer data, something like that. Is that what I'm?
Yes, yes. So, okay, while we are talking about this, like I said, third generation, this part has also evolved completely.
Okay.
So now this part is at next level, right? Earlier, Informatica was a bad job. So basically, either they used to do it every 6 hours, or most probably they always used to do it 24 hours. I mean,
Okay.
12 hours delay. That means every night they used
Okay.
to process it. Now things have changed, right? So the users are fast, decisions are fast. This overall thing again has evolved. So Informatica has become, while it's a big elephant, best product for ETL. Now the changes have come to ELT, which is real-time replication from ERP solutions to your data warehouses or data lake. From data warehouse or data lake, no more IT team does this, right? So you have ClickView, Qliksense. These are okay. You don't have ClickView anymore. It is Qliksense in the third generation. SAP BO is not a third generation product. It's gone. So Tableau is, MicroStrategy is.
Okay. I
Here we also got an addition of Power BI.
think we have Spotfire, something they were using. Spotfire.
Yes, there were a couple of things.
Okay.
Spotfire, there is Sisense. In US, there are a lot of things.
Okay.
Globally, these are the guys known. If you ask me for US specifically, I'll tell you. In US, there are a host of products. I mean, of course, it's a centralized startup world, right? So you can have, so there's Sisense, there is Spotfire. I think Spotfire was acquired recently. I don't recall which company.
Okay.
There was, yeah, Burst, Domo.
Okay.
So these are all modern day technologies. Okay, how are they modern day technologies? So this was also evolved, right? This example of ad hoc data. Now, IT team does not give this ad hoc. IT team wouldn't sit and develop this ad hoc data. So the way the world is going, the the third generation is evolving is
Okay.
in front of your data lake or data warehouse. Now there are solutions which fit in as catalogs. data catalog.
Okay.
So what they do is, so like I said, the user is smart. He says, I want data for last 5 years for a customer, all the customer spend. The IT team wouldn't sit and develop it. That is the idea of democratization, right? Less on IT team, more on users. So what IT team nowadays has done is, or the latest product that is selling in the entire this landscape is data catalog. So catalog, what it does, it will onboard or it will identify all your tables from your data warehouse or data lake and give like a shopping cart experience. So basically user can just go online, search for the tables, fetch the tables and use it in their analysis. Now analysis, so these products are more so I would say as platform for analytics.
So when you say data catalog, right? Is that
Mhm.
the data modeling part?
No, data modeling still you finish it in your data warehouse. Catalog is just a identifier or helping you to find. Suppose there are 1,000 tables. How do you know which table has sales data? So catalog is like a curated information where you load all the tables with all the business descriptions, field names, business titles, and details around the data so that the user can go search for, okay, I need sales data, and he will get all the sales related data.
So the data modeling part, meaning like the entity relationship, like are you connecting like multiple tables and just coming with a data modeling thing that happens in the data warehouse section,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay. So in a data catalog, it's not a one-to-one, right? You are pointing to the data model, not the individual tables.
So there are different catalogs. There are certain catalogs which point to the model, certain catalogs which point to the tables. It is up
Okay.
to you how you want to set up those
If
data
it is a
catalogs.
simple table like personal data, right, or personal record, it could be one table, your first name, last name, email address, phone number, right? An address book. It could be just one table. But
Yes, yes,
if it is a sales data, it could be like 100 different tables like connected using the data modeling technique,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
So catalog helps you do that. So there are different companies, there are different catalogs. So
Okay.
Qlik as an organization also has a catalog. Then
Okay.
there's Azure catalog, there is AWS
But
catalog.
still, like that data modeling part has to be done by the IT still, right? Is that right?
Yes, you're right.
Okay. All right. Sorry, go ahead. I just want to make sure, like, I have a good understanding before you step on to the next one. So this is good. I like this conversation. Okay.
Right. So okay. So this is okay. So this process data warehouse catalog is yes in a robust enterprise deployment. Now there are a lot of scenarios where companies might not invest on this, right? So companies might say, okay, this is a big project in itself.
I was about to say that, like, this looks like we have complicated from what we had before. It's
Right.
a lot of
So
layer,
a lot
right?
of companies might say we can't. So there are
Correct.
certain BI products, for example, Qliksense, right?
Right.
So okay, all of these BI products, to be honest, have certain capabilities of processing data. So they don't really need a data warehouse. They
Hmm.
all can connect directly to ERP, CRM, multiple sources, right? All of these products can connect to hundreds of sources. They can directly go to the source, fetch data. There is certain aspect of modeling, data modeling over here. So this concept, right, data warehouse,
Hmm.
they can do data modeling. So I'll say data on onboarding, data modeling,
Right.
then the front end part of it, analysis. So these all these products can do it. Now, what stands or what differentiates them is how best they can do it. So Tableau, so Qliksense, what I have been to my knowledge is like the leading the pack, right? So Qliksense is being the most simplest and the most easiest to actually do all of these things. So you can, with my experience, at least whatever I can talk for Qlik is, I've been able to do the biggest complex challenges with Qlik, right?
Okay.
Whatever data warehousing concepts you would ideally apply, I was able to apply within Qliksense or ClickView, the historical thing that I've been using. So that is the power of Qliksense, is what I have felt.
So
There
you
are a
don't
lot
need
of
this
big retail
strong
companies.
you don't need this setup of a big data or a data
Yeah.
lake or any concept. So you can directly connect to the primary source, data source, and kind of bring the data together, like uh, for the requirement of the user in the same sense, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. So
Okay. Yeah.
Tableau starts failing when it is a huge data set, multiple different data sources. So the Tableau always fallbacks on a data lake or
Okay.
data warehouse. So after one point, Tableau starts recommending, please set up a data warehouse. I can't work directly with your transactional system.
Okay. When we get
Micro,
into this topic, I would like to see that, like, how we do that. Okay.
yeah. So MicroStrategy did that. MicroStrategy could do directly, but after a certain point, it starts to become too complex. So that is where there was a time. So it was in analytics world, you call it the Nokia of analytics. If you know the Nokia story, right? So they had a chance to change when even while iPhone or smartphones came in, but Nokia was like reluctant, telling, okay, we are the leaders in the phone segment, and this is what the phones are selling now. We'll not jump into the smartphone bandwagon. But after
Right.
a certain point, they just diminished, right?
Right.
But of course, now they're coming back with their smartphones. They're not able to capture the market. So it is a
Right.
classic story of MicroStrategy. At
Right.
one point in the second generation, right?
Right.
In
Yeah.
second generation, MicroStrategy was very powerful and very leading. So it had
Okay.
a equal. It was a very big competition to ClickView, right? It
Okay.
was pretty strong. Enterprise. It had everything that was best suited for a second generation best product. But the same story, when things started evolving, they stuck to their arrogance, telling, no, this is what the enterprises would need, this is what it is going to continue. And after a certain point, they suddenly saw so many products competing with them, and they became kind of irrelevant in the industry.
Okay.
Now they're coming back. That is it. Of course,
So
Power
Power
BI.
BI is oh, sorry, go ahead. You're about to explain.
Sorry, no,
No,
go
no,
ahead, go ahead.
about to explain anyway. Power BI.
Yeah, Power BI is the latest entrant. I think it has been there for 4 years now. If I'm right, I don't recall the number of years. So it is the latest generation analytics solution from Microsoft. So
Okay.
Microsoft also was kind of arrogant, telling Excel is the best analytics solution. You don't need anything. So they used to push users to use Excel and PowerPoint and SQL. But at one point they realized that's not how things will change. So they really brought in a Power BI solution. Power BI is good. It works, like I said, it has some basic capabilities to work with directly with the ERP solution, right? Any ERP solution. But Microsoft being Microsoft, they always push you to a data warehouse that could be your SQL. Now things have changed because of Azure. So Azure in itself has a lot of offerings. So they push users to Azure or SQL. Right.
Okay.
Same stories for Sisense, Spotfire. They all are. So what happens is, if I have to give you an idea, so okay, here there is also ThoughtSpot. ThoughtSpot is also a good BI solution. I think these are the guys who are famous in US. They have their strengths, but they have a lot of weaknesses on a lot of angles. So that is where they have not really scaled up or come into mainstream. So to give you an idea, Qliksense has almost 50,000 customers. Tableau has around close to 40,000 customers. MicroStrategy is lost the battle. Power BI is picking up, but
Oh,
ThoughtSpot is also picking up. But because the way it is structured or the overall concept of the product, it is not kicked in. So I think they have global 300 customers, and that
okay.
is where they focus only. They just focus on enterprise space.
Power BI is
Sisense,
more of a Microsoft package, so they will try to push it, right?
yeah. So Power BI is many times given free for enterprises. for
Right.
people who buy Microsoft Stack, right? They buy
So
SQL Server,
that's a bigger.
reporting,
Yeah.
right? SSIS, I think you spoke about it. That is more towards ETL, SSIS or SSAS, right? Microsoft SSIS. Yeah. So that is where Power BI is pushed. Spotfire was where once upon a time, I think it started with a bang, but I think it's fizzled out. I don't hear a lot about it. So there are companies who are they're just using it. Burst was one of the solutions. It was a confused solution, Burst, to be honest. They positioned themselves as ETL come analytics, right?
Okay.
So it didn't really fly. I think these were acquired. I'm not very sure which company acquired. So Burst merged into another company.
Okay.
Then came Domo. Domo is a cloud-based analytics solution. It is also trying to fight a battle now. It is a less known product in US. It is trying to grow itself.
Okay. I have two questions. Okay.
Mhm.
This is very good to have a good foundation of information. Um, my one question is like, I'm sure like, we are going to talk about later is we always talked about like, SQL, Oracle, um, very structured way of like, how data is stored, right? So
Mhm.
later probably like, we'll be talking structured and unstructured data. Is that right?
Okay. Yeah. So okay, we'll cover that now.
Well, my next question
Yeah.
is,
Mhm.
uh, let me ask these two questions because like it's just in my mind. Um, my next question would be like, so you say business intelligence, you say business analytics or data analytics, right? These terminologies, are these interchangeable or like, is there a difference between business intelligence versus data analytics versus, I mean, data science could be totally a different thing, but at least between these two terminologies, right? Is there a difference? Business intelligence versus business slash data analytics, right? Or business analytics.
Yeah. Okay. These all three are same. It is just confused terminologies. A lot of people say, okay, business intelligence. So
Okay.
when they say intelligence, it was earlier famously known as business intelligence because
Okay.
the second generation, right? So
Right.
the idea was to spread that part of it, giving the users ability to understand insights and make decisions.
Okay.
And data analytics was where I would say it's now become very common. It's a rather than so when we say business intelligence earlier, it used to involve everything. You had to have a data warehouse, you had to had a product to deliver it, and users use it. Data analytics is now common, right? So it's a prevalent terminology as of now. So you can, in fact, if I have to come to understanding, you can say MIS reporting was like the first generation where you used to get MIS reports. Then came BI. They said, okay, set up this entire ecosystem of BI. It's still BI. You still call this as the third generation is still a business intelligence, but it's more prevalent at the end user where you call data analytics. So user has capability to analyze data on any kind of data, right? So it is more easier to call it as data analytics. It's just terminologies. Of
Okay.
course, like you said, data science is a totally different concept.
Okay.
Now, big data, unstructured data, there's a lot of questions around that, right? So data in itself has various formats. Structured,
I can give you an example, like, once you start doing this, right? For example, like I work in a company where data comes from a very structured a quality management system or an ERP system or an MES manufacturing execution system where data is very
correct.
structured, right? You have fields, people enter data, these fields are mapped to columns, data is populated in the SQL or Oracle databases, very structured, right? For a given, ID. We do have like, for example, machines, right? Which kind of like, mixes a grinder, right? Which mixes like, pharmaceutical ingredients, right? And this
Right.
machine, they are they are also like electronics, like they do have a PLC. I'm sure like you might have heard the ways it's programmable logical controllers, right? So they also have like a short a low storage mechanism, like memory, but we continuously transmit this information when the mixer is running. So for example, what time it started, what is the speed it's running, what is the RPM, like what is the gear size, what is the gear it's running on, right? These kind of like programmable parameters, and also the running parameters of the grinder. If you think about like a mixer grinder, right, these information are fed to a data source, right? So these are not very
Yeah.
structured, right? If you look at it, these
Hmm.
are very structured. But these are stored in, for example, could be a flat file, or I don't know. There could be a lot of other mechanisms of how it's stored. Now, how do you deal with this data? I need analytics of this one. For example, after like 5 or 6 hours, every time a gear fails, right? I have to look at the pattern, right? Okay, so if I mix like I'm just going to take an example of, if I mix always, if I try to grind this kind of rock, right? After 5 rounds, it always
Yeah.
this breaks, right? So I want to see the pattern. To see the pattern, I need data. For data, how do I bring in the data to an analytical platform when it's unstructured? Okay, I'll just stop there. This is just one of my scenarios, right? You go ahead and explain like the fundamental, then we can get into that.
Sure. I think we'll discuss this to then probably. Okay. So what we could do is, if you're okay, we'll continue this in detail tomorrow, and I'll take you through.
That's fine. I leave it
Okay,
to you.
in detail around that. But to give you an heads up on structured, unstructured, right? It's a very broad classification of structured and unstructured. For example, a lot of the examples that you gave, right? First thing is ERP is completely structured. That means anything that is put in a table. A
Right.
simple definition is anything that is can be put in a table, irrespective of how or where it is coming from, is always a structured data.
Correct.
So the second example that you gave, which is IoT related, right? So you have IoT devices,
Got it.
all the
Okay.
data is
Right.
right. So the log files. So a lot of people consider that to be unstructured. So this is
Correct.
a very big misconception. People say, see, the IoT devices generally comes through. There are two mechanisms. One is logs. So all the machine logs are generated. Two, either the IoT sensors send live streaming. Depending
Correct.
on what kind of sensors you're using, you do it. Either of them are structured. What happens is a log file is always a structured file. In a very rare scenario, there are complex log files which are not structured. When I say not structured, it is like a Facebook comment, right? So there is no description, there is no a level, there is nothing. But if you understand log files, they always comma delimited. They either have a comma separation. That is how logs are entered, right? Time and date, what is the status, what is the error, what is the description. Any log file you pick up, that is how it is structured. So,
But
so whatever you.
sometimes like my understanding of I have seen, I manage a couple of systems, right? When I
Yeah.
when I look at the log file, right, there are
Hmm.
there are like hundreds and hundreds of lines, right? But there is no relationship between one line and another, and there is no specific pattern of like delimiters there, right? That's what I call it as like hey, there is no structure to it. I see just a text value, then the next line another text value, the next line if we did errors, there is another bunch of text value. There is no
Hmm.
comma, there is no specific pattern of
Yes.
space, comma, or
Yes.
anything like that, right? That log
Right.
file to me is unstructured, the way I understand,
Correct.
right?
You're right. Yes. Yes. That is unstructured. So when you say, that's why I was very specific. There are IoT devices which do two kinds of things. One is log, one is streaming.
Right.
In logs, as far as I have understanding, most of the logs are structured. They might look unstructured, but if you actually carefully segregate them or work with them, they are unstructured. They are unstructured. That is why to do, if your log file analysis is a specific ask, of course you can do with these modern day technologies, but there are Splunk is one of them.
Splunk, okay.
Yeah, Splunk and Kibana. right?
Oh,
These are very specific to log files, so they can understand the log files and do it. But
oh,
okay, so more on that later. So what I
that's
was
okay.
trying to tell is your IoT can also be structured data, because you can, if it is streaming data, then it is definitely structured, because streaming data can always be put in a certain table. Anything that you can put in a table format is structured. Now, what are unstructured data sets? For example, your like in a medical world, right? Health records,
Right.
those are stored in images or PDFs, right?
Okay.
So nowadays, databases allow, like, I wouldn't say databases, data storage,
Right.
which is allowed for you to randomly store files, or like you said, a log file. One file itself is a log file. So it is not like generally what happens in a big text file, you have multiple records, like you said, line by line. But in an actual scenario, in an unstructured world, each log file is a record of that log. That every second will have one text file, which will have a dump of data. So that is unstructured for me. That is the complexity of
Can you
unstructured
say
data.
the last thing you said? I just missed that part.
See, what we discussed is one file having multiple lines of data, right?
I understand. I understand.
Now imagine each of that line is stored in a separate text file as a dump, as like
Oh,
a big text. So
okay.
you'll have hundreds and thousands or millions of files.
Files.
That is
Correct.
unstructured. That is unstructured.
Okay.
That is where Hadoop comes in. So we were talking about Hadoop, storage of files, storage of data. That is
Okay.
where Hadoop comes in and manages those things. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So tomorrow I'll do a little more detail around data, and we'll then see how we can move forward.
Okay.
If you're comfortable, we'll
So let
move
me
forward
ask
with
you,
Qlik.
how familiar are you with pharma industry or biopharma industry? Because like
I
this way,
can't say.
so if I
Yeah.
say hey, quality management system or non-conformance, kappa, supplier quality, right? Does it make sense to you if I use those terminologies? Because these are more towards pharma or medical device industries.
See, I've done what.
That's okay if it's
I don't
not
think
that.
I can say I can understand the terminologies, but I
Right.
can understand concepts. So I do have heard of those concepts and understand it. But yeah, you
I'm
can
happy.
you can say that that is a learning for me also. I'll
Right.
do my homework when you use
No,
these
I'm
terms too.
happy about you being very knowledgeable and we are having this interactive learning rather than you just going through the slides and I'm just staring at it, right? This is very interactive. I like this way of learning, right?
Right.
And just making sure we lay a strong foundation before we move on to the next
Correct.
topic. Important.
Right.
All right.
Okay. Okay. I think for today, this is what I'll probably tomorrow will
So
avoid
tomorrow
these.
same time, is that good?
Yeah, same time is good. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you
Yeah.
again. Have a good day.
All right. Thank you. Thanks. Same to you. Thank you.
I will have a different meeting ID.
No, I think it would be the same thing.
Same thing. Okay, great. All right,
Yeah.
great. All right. Have
Okay.
a good day.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye bye.